Talent is completely useless if you stop working at 5 p.m. when you clock out of your job and you get home. Talent is completely useless if you're not willing to put in the work day after day after day. You look at guys winning online, assume they are naturally better, that they're just gifted, they're better with cameras, they're better at sales, they're better and more willing to do whatever it is that they're doing and that's making them succeed. You think that it's just something they're born with. It's just a gift that they naturally have. That is a lie. The reality is that they aren't more gifted. They just have more reps. They just have put in more work than you. Alex Hormozi preaches this all the time. He preaches about the law of volume. And the reality is that when you put in the work, time after time after time, when you go out there and you run a mile, and you run another mile, and you run another mile, eventually you're going to run 2. Eventually you're going to run 3, 4, 5, and you're going to be able to run more with time. As time progresses, you grow in that aspect. But the reality is that it's only going to happen when you put in rep after rep after rep. It requires you to show up no matter what. It requires grit. It requires grinding. One of the phenomenons that happen consistently is that as people get rich, their generations begin to lower the status of their finances in their family. And the reality of why that happens, and the reality of why professional athletes' children tend not to be as great professionals as the parent, is because of the fact that they didn't have the need for it like the parent did, like the main person or the first person that succeeded did. The reality is that talent makes people lazy, that having everything in your hands makes you lazy because you never had to eat dirt to get the result. Grit is the ultimate equalizer. A hard worker with a basic system will bankrupt a lazy genius every single time. You could be the most talented person ever, but if you're not willing to show up, if you're not willing to be there day after day, the person that doesn't have the talent that you have, that is willing to put in the work, is going to succeed over you all the time. It's better to be a hard worker and not have the talent than have the talent and be lazy and never want to put in the work. The reality is that the hard worker almost always succeeds first. The reality is that the hard worker almost always succeeds in comparison to the lazy, talented person. By the way, if you are tired of excuses and want to outwork your competition using raw value and systems, hit the subscribe button. This is the channel for those who are ready to grind. As you look on screen, I want you to look at the fact that I'm drawing this T-chart, and I know that it's not going to be the most beautiful thing ever, but the most important thing is that the left side, let's call it talent. And the right side, we're going to call it grit. And as we begin to compare these things, we're going to begin to see certain differences between the two. Now, talent, let's write 30% close rate, right? Sales, 30% close rate. And on the right side for grit, let's write down 10% close rate. 10% close rate. Again, I'm not the best handwriting or even less the best drawer. So as you begin to see on the left side, we have someone that may have talent, and the close is 30% close rate. And on the right side, we have someone that has 10% close rate, and that isn't closing at a rate that's as great as the person that's talented. But if the guy that is talented only makes 2 calls, but the guy that has grit makes 10 calls, who do you think is going to succeed more? Is it going to be the guy that has grit or the guy that has talent? Because the fact of the matter is that if you make 2 calls and you do 30% of that, then 100% you have less than 1 person that you are going to close. Now, if you have 10 calls and you do 10% close rate, and you're just a person with grit that doesn't have necessarily the talent and that's not the best at it, but that is willing to put in the work. If you do 10 calls, 10% of it is 1. So the reality is that the person that has grit will almost always succeed over the person that has talent. Why? Because they're able to do more volume. The law of volume that Alex Hormozi talks about, that I mentioned before, will always, almost always succeed. Because the fact of the matter is that there are some people that even if they don't put all the work in, they do succeed above the people with grit. But almost always, grit will win over talent. Now, I know it sucks that many times a lot of us aren't necessarily the most talented. I'm not necessarily the best at sales, and I'm not necessarily someone that can just call someone up and just sell something so easily, right? Now, I understand that there are some people that are good at this, but for those out there that don't necessarily have are the most talented person like me, I want you to focus entirely on what you can control. The reality is that you can't control the talent that someone has over you. You can't control the talent that you don't have. You can begin to work on it though. You can control the skill and begin to develop that skill and become just as good or better than the person that has the natural talent. Yes, the person that has the natural talent has an edge over you. Yes, but if you're willing to put in the work, you will always have an edge over them. So control the controllables. Control the things that you have and that you can manage instead of focusing on the things that you can't change. So be the person that does 50 calls instead of 5. Be the person that shows up instead of being lazy and staying home. Be the person that will put in the work, that will grind and have the grit to succeed. Stop relying on talent. Go get your reps in. I'm going to see you on the next one. And don't forget to hit the subscribe button, give a like, and put a comment below about maybe your story of how maybe you're not the most talented, but you are going to put in the work from now on and how you're going to put in the work. Let us know in the comments. And likewise, don't forget that your path to freedom is here.